Today we are discussing Flutter Hooks, what it is and how we can use it in Flutter. Let's move on to the installation. Like any other package, we can install it via terminal or by adding a dependency to the pubspec.yum. We have prepared an example project, so now let's jump to the pubspec.yum and add the latest version of Flutter Hooks. Save the file. This should trigger the pubget command in Visual Studio Code. Now let's move in the main file and first understand what Flutter Hooks is and how it can improve our work. As you can see, we have a stateful widget here. Stateful widget has its own state, so we have two classes, myHomepage and myHomepageState. Here is the increment counter function. Inside this function, you have setState, which increments the counter value. Every time you want to change widget state, you have to use stateful widget unless you are using any state management. Flutter Hooks can help us here. You can change this code and shorten it by using hooks. Here, we have just setState function. But when dealing with controllers or other advanced logic, we often have to use methods like initState, dispose, or any other like change dependencies, causing a lot of boilerplate code. Flutter Hooks solve this problem by reducing this boilerplate. As first example, let's change this counter stateful widget to a hook widget. Let's jump to the official docs and find existing hooks. As we can see, there are many hooks like useEffect, useState, and so on. First, we will use useState, and this hook allows us to create a variable and subscribe to its changes, so we can track and change the state without using setState and stateful widget. Now let's try to do it. Before we change the code, make sure it works by running the app. The app has started. This is a standard Flutter counter app and it works. Let's go back to the code and start refactoring our code. First, we can change the counter value from 0 to useState hook with an initial value of 0. We need to import the hooks package. Now we have an error. Value notifier can be assigned to a variable type int. If we hover on the useState hook, it's clear that the type for useState is value notifier. So let's change it to final. This allows Dart to infer the type without needing to explicitly specify it. Now let's deal with this function and comment the code inside. We will change it in the future. Now change the stateful widget to a stateless widget and refactor the necessary parts of the code. Now we have an error. Can't define the const constructor because of the counter value. To remove this error, we have to move this counter value inside the build method. This is one of the conditions for hooks to work properly. Every hook should be declared in the build method. Now we have two solutions to use hooks inside the widget. First, we can change the stateless widget to a hook widget. Second, we can use hook builder in a particular widget tree place to get access to the hooks. So let's stay with hook widget. I commented this function on purpose to show that in this place we don't have access to the counter value anymore. Therefore, we have to operate directly on the counter value inside the build method or move the function increment counter inside build. This function does not cause side effects, so we can do it. Now update the code inside the function, so let's write counter value ++. Value is a getter for the value inside the useState hook. Let's try to run the application to see if everything works. The code works, but we need to change the text display. Let's use text interpolation, add .value, and wrap it with brackets. Refresh the app, and now we fix the error. To sum up, we removed the stateful widget And we can remove this function too, because we can just use the counter value directly in onPressed. Refresh the app to make sure all is working. Our refactor is done. We removed the stateful widget and replaced it with hook widget using useState. And now, without setState and with minimal code, we can rebuild this counter widget. We can use other hooks, as I said before, for example, useEffect. We can use it for side effects like async calls to the API, opening streams, WebSockets, and so on. UseMemoized allows us to cache complex objects. Thanks to this, we can optimize the app, because if the data does not change, we can use the same cached object on every rebuild instead of creating it from scratch. There are a lot of hooks. Very useful are animation hooks. We don't need to create controllers by hand and write init state, dispose functions, and so on. Just use one simple hook. The next very useful hook is useTextEditingController to easily create a controller for a text field. Let's code this. Final controller equals useTextEditingController initial value. Now let's write text field and pass controller to it. Of course, the whole text field will be wrapped in the expanded widget. And now we have a text field with the initial value in the app. We can save a lot of code with hooks, but we can create our own hook too. Let's jump to the docs. Here are instructions for creating our own hooks, both by function and by class. So let's try to write our own hook class. Copy this code. We can see that this code is a little bit old. We can fix this by adding the late keyword, but this variable will not be needed, so let's remove this. What we will do is simply every time one of these functions is called, the time will be printed to the console. This helps us know how much time will be between each function. Let's write print datetime now in every function. And to be clear how this code works, we write something like stateful widget, but instead of stateful widget, we extend hook. Next here is the type returned by the hook. This is void because we are just printing data to the console. And we have functions to override like init hook when our hook is first starting, build while building the hook, and dispose when our hook is destroyed and removed from the widget tree. Okay. We have written the basic logic for this hook. Now, let's wrap our timeAlive class in a function. Use my hook and return use timeAlive. We can use the hook prepared in this way in our app. In the build method, simply write use my hook and restart the app. As we can see, in the console, some data is printing. Let's restart again, and new time is printed. We could write logic to calculate the difference between init hook and build. Init hook is starting like init state in stateful widget, and build in the same way, like build in the stateful widget or stateless widget. So this much time passed between initialization and build. Of course, if we will have another page, our dispose will be triggered. Let's write print statements for better understanding of what is going on. Restart the application and we can see init first time and build on every rebuild. This way we created our own hook. We are only limited by our imagination. and you can create different hooks depending on your needs. To sum up, Flutter hooks are very helpful. Save time and boilerplate while building apps and easily cooperate with statements like block or river pod. Thanks for your time and see you next time.